Alright folks, how you doing? So in this video I'm going to be reacting to the late Christopher Hitchens talking about a greater narcissist, and that is Bill Clinton, the former President of the United States.
We welcome him back, Christopher Hitchens, Vanity Fair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us, and the author of this book, No One Left to Lie To. You talk about it inside the book. How'd you come up with this title?
There is a guy, a good man called David Shippers, who was, he's a Chicago Democrat, rather of the old school, prosecutor, who was hired by Henry Hyde to be the chief counsel for the House Judiciary Committee. And in his summary speech, closing speech to the impeachment debate before the committee, he said, look, the president has now lied in a civil deposition, he's lied to a grand jury, he's lied to all his cabinet, he's lied to all his colleagues, to his family, to the American people, blah, blah, blah. There's no one left to lie to. And I was watching this. I had an earlier title in mind for the book. It was even in the catalogue already. The publishers were furious when, having seen this, I was watching it at Miami Airport on Airport TV. I thought, that's got to be the title. It's perfect.
Absolutely. It really is the perfect title, because Bill Clinton's a greater narcissist. That means, unlike the lessers in the mid-range, which is 99% of narcissists, Bill Clinton is actually aware of what he is. He knows what he is. And he knows that he lies. But lying to a narcissist comes easier than breathing. The only difference is with the greater that they know that they're lying.
Was the original title?
It was going to be Ask Not, Tell Not.
Why did you and your publisher select this picture for the cover?
I had no idea till I sat down with the design people how many pictures there were of Clinton looking both smug and wicked.
Smug and wicked. That pretty much sums up the greater narcissist. That's a pretty good description. Even though Christopher Hitchens probably didn't realize that Bill Clinton was a greater narcissist. He probably would have had inclinations that he was narcissistic, but, you know, not full-blown narcissist. Well, who knows? I don't know what he knew or what he didn't know, but, you know, now with HG Tutor, we can identify and look at exactly what greater narcissists are. Of course, he's even higher than that. He's the ultra, but, you know, who knows better than one himself? It's like that movie Blue Streak, if you ever see it with Martin Lawrence. Like, instantly he goes out on a call and can spot within like 2 seconds that it's phony. Why? Because he himself is a jewel thief, so he can spot all the tricks and all that sort of thing that robbers would use to defraud and all the rest of it. Whereas the cops are kind of clueless, but because Martin Lawrence is a former thief himself, he identifies exactly what's going on very, very fast. It's a good movie, check it out. But that's the point that I'm making is, you know, HG can point out the narcissist because he is one.
And mendacious.
Christopher Hitchens, I don't think he was a narcissist. I don't think he shows a lot of narcissistic traits. I think he leans much more towards the empathic. I don't know if he was an empath, but I don't think he was a narcissist at all.
All at the same time, but that is almost the perfect one. And there's also a hint of triumph here in this one, as if he really does feel, I think that's everybody. I don't think there can be anyone left to lie to.
And I say
but my book is addressed to all the people who wanted to be lied to, and who still do. So in a way, he wins again until I can turn the tide.
When I say the name Sidney Blumenthal, what comes to mind?
Old friend of mine, unfortunately also an old friend of Mr. Clinton's. I'm a great admirer of and worker for. And alas, as he said to the Senate when in his testimony, one of those who was lied to. I mean, he realizes now that Mr. Clinton told him a false story.
Now, if you've ever been misled by a greater narcissist, don't beat yourself up, because they are predators, you know. They lie very easily, and they seduce and they manipulate with extremely proficient skill. So, you know, you've got nothing to be ashamed of if you were conned by a greater narcissist. You might want to be a little bit embarrassed if you were fooled by a lesser, but that's another story.
About Monica Lewinsky and other matters, and let him, which shows what kind of a friend Mr. Clinton is, let him go into the grand jury and retell this false and defamatory story.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you listen to a lot of HG's own videos, he talks about doing this very thing himself. You know, greater narcissists will have people that they manipulate and that they use. I mean, if you want a master course in that, just go back and look at Stalin's career when he was maneuvering people into position to be sacrificed so that he could become the premier. Because nobody thought that Stalin was going to take over from Lenin, you know, but being a greater narcissist, he achieved it quite easily and quite effectively, because greater narcissists, they use people. Because there's no human beings in the world of a narcissist, there's only assets. There's only tools to be used. You really do have to understand this. That's not me, by the way, that's just the video.
The grand jury was me, and I was prepared to say as much when asked by the House Judiciary Committee. And rather to my surprise, because Sidney had denied telling anyone else, it became a huge story. I mean, it was a week-long flap.
Triangulation. That's a good word when understanding narcissistic psychology. They use triangulation quite a lot.
Which I thought rather distracted attention from the main story, which was that the president had authored effectively a slander against a former comfort woman of his for whom he had no further use. That's the kind of guy he is. It's what he quite often does.
Well, yeah. Narcissists will treat lovers like that, and greater narcissists will know it and just simply not care. They don't care.
And had it circulated in such a way, I thought, as to constitute an obstruction of justice, because it was a threat to her as well as a slander of her.
I can't find the quote in here, but in the conversation that you had with Sidney Blumenthal...
Someone's been reading it closely.
I have read it, actually. But and I'm going to paraphrase, you allude to the fact that Sidney Blumenthal said, we're going to take care of Juanita Broderick. That's not exactly what you wrote, but can you explain what happened?
It was actually Kathleen Woolley.
Kathleen Woolley, I'm sorry.
Kathleen Woolley. Well, I know it's hard to keep all these female victims in perspective, isn't it? I think I can now tell them apart, but it's an effort. Kathleen Woolley, the week before I had my lunch with Sidney, Kathleen Woolley had gone on 60 Minutes to say that she'd been the recipient of unwelcome attentions.
She must be a pretty brave woman to go up against a greater narcissist, because you're really taking a huge risk by coming on their radar in a negative way, you know. Greater narcissists are usually better at covering their tracks than this as well, incidentally. But yeah, have your shit together before you go up against a greater, because they will fuck you up.
The president, I thought she looked like she was...
And laugh while they're doing it. They'll thoroughly enjoy fucking with you and destroying your life.
Telling the truth. I have heard since that she's been subjected to various kinds of intimidation of a sort of rather mysterious kind about it.
See, I'm not surprised. That's pretty standard stuff when you're, you know, on the radar of a greater narcissist.
I brought it up with Sidney, or it came up at the lunch, and I remember he said that, well, her numbers are high now. You know, the polls had found people thinking she was credible, but they'll be down by the end of the week. And what had happened was, I didn't like the tone of it, you know, so that we'll soon fix her kind of thing. But the following day, I think it was, the White House found and released all the private memos between her and the president. Some of them quite affectionate, you know, and admiring. She is or was a very Clintonoid Democrat. And what angered me about that, they found those and put them out in a day, more or less. Those had been subpoenaed not long before by the Paula Jones lawyers, those same memos, and they wanted any and all paper contact between the president and Ms. Woolley. White House says, sorry, we just can't seem to find them. We just can't find them. You can subpoena us all you want. We can't put our hands on the papers. Once they needed to reply to 60 Minutes, though, they found the papers in short order. And that struck me as so typical of the MO of this White House. It's so 10th rate and nasty and underhand. Like everything about this president and his tactics.
Yep, absolutely. Take notes, by the way. This is what you can expect when you're dealing with a greater narcissist.
Way through the book, you point out, first of all, that the president had precisely 2 cabinet meetings in 1998.
Yep, count them, 2.
One in January.
To lie to the cabinet.
And one in August.
To tell him he was going to have to tell some bit of the truth, after all. And sorry about that, guys. He didn't really say sorry, as a matter of fact.
I wouldn't expect it. Get an apology from a greater narcissist, or any narcissist, it's never going to be sincere.
He defended himself in the usual bombastic way when Donna Shalala said, well, you know, you could get the impression, Mr. President, that you'd kind of put yourself ahead of, you know, all other considerations, your friends, your policies, your or that you really were thinking only of yourself. He whirled on her and said, well, you're the sort of person who would have preferred Nixon to Kennedy.
Why did he say that?
Well, I think he'll say anything. That was the comment that was overheard afterwards. He'll try anything. He's a complete solipsist. And he's completely without scruple. But I think the consequences of the first meeting are the graver ones, because at the end of that meeting, whether the cabinet were persuaded by his lying or not, I don't know, in their hearts, so to speak, but they were induced to go out into the street.
Yeah, because the greater narcissist has his lackeys and his attack dogs to do his bidding on his behalf. Like I've said, HG's talked about doing this himself on his own channel, so it's not a surprise to me.
The Vice President did, and the Secretary of State did, and make complete abject fools of themselves by saying they were absolutely sure he was telling the truth. Now, that's what everyone sees when they see Madeleine Albright coming to a negotiation now. They see, oh, well, great, there's the woman who believed the president about Monica Lewinsky and went out and stood outside in the street and said, everything's fine. Nobody resigned. Only one person has resigned from this administration. It wasn't over any of these things. And it wasn't someone who'd been humiliated, as these people were. They've lost all their pride, all their dignity.
Well, that will happen if you're around a greater narcissist for any extended period of time, because they're basically a black hole that just sucks everything in and destroys it.
Later in this...
including human dignity and human souls. They are a black hole, a bottomless pit. Let there be no mistake about that. Understand that.
Chapter, you say that I've known a number of people who work for him or with him and who have worked with this man. They act like cult members while they are still under the spell and talk like ex-cult members as soon as they've broken away.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Exactly, because that's what the greater narcissist is. They're very, very effective.
That's true.
George Stephanopoulos?
George is the one I know the best.
The phrase cult of personality perfectly sums up the greater narcissist. I mean, I think the phrase was originally used with Stalin, I believe. But, you know, even the song Cult of Personality, a lot of the people who are mentioned in that song are greater narcissists. I know this for a fact. It perfectly sums up the greater narcissist.
Yeah. Maybe it's slightly unfair to say that he acted completely like a cult member while he was working there. He's a relatively straight guy and rather decent, I think. But, you know, he had to often stand up for or defend impossible positions. He talks much like an ex-cult member now he's left there. He talks like someone who will say, this is, you know, believe it or not, trust me, I used to believe this. This is how I used to think. And now I can't imagine how I did, but I don't think it anymore.
Well, anyone who's been entangled by a narcissist will find themselves in this position, pretty inevitably.
That was what made it familiar to me.
And let me bring up one other point, and then we'll get to calls. You talk about the money.
You were smiling, I encouraged.
Well, I'm laughing. Let me read this, and then I'll have you follow up. You talk about David Geffen, Steven Spielberg of DreamWorks, who have contributed close to $400,000 and $236,000 to the Clintons of the Democratic Party, the Waltons of Walmart, $216,000, and Larry and Sheila Lawrence of the Hotel Del Coronado and their associated real estates, $100,000 of contributions by their companies or their employees to the president or the Democratic Party. You go on to say that Mr. Lawrence later achieved a brief celebrity by his triple crown of buying, lying, and dying.
Yeah.
Explain.
Well, he and his wife gave all this money, and therefore they got into the Lincoln bedroom, because, as you know, this president, let me put it like this, maybe because I'm an immigrant to this country, I perhaps am too easily overcome with reverence, but it seems to me one of the things about Clintonism is that it's profaned, it's blasphemed, by turning the Oval Office into a sort of cheap massage parlor, the Lincoln bedroom into a sort of cheap motel for fat cats, and Arlington Cemetery into something that can be franchised for fundraising. Mr. Lawrence invented a war record for himself so that he could, along with a hefty donation, have himself buried in Arlington Cemetery, and he and his wife appointed to diplomatic positions and so on. When it was all discovered that this had been a fraud, and that the money shouldn't really have been handed over anyway, he had to be dug up out of Arlington Cemetery and reburied. Now, that would get me down if I was a patriotic American, which I can't claim to be. And I was appalled and rather astonished that it didn't get people down, that that things that we're supposed to teach the children about now, the Lincoln bedroom, Mr. Lincoln's bedroom, for heaven's sake, used as a motel, the Oval Office used as a massage parlor, and Arlington Cemetery used as a dump for lying fat cat fundraisers. This is appalling, isn't it? And yet everyone said, but these are private matters. Leave the guy alone. Well, my impression is that now that it's over and he's walked, just literally walked, got clean away with everything, and not apologized, and said that he doesn't regard impeachment as a disgrace. That now people are turning away from him. And for reasons they can't quite explain, I have a lot of people come up to me now and say, you know, I didn't agree with you about this, or I don't agree with you about that, but when he comes on the TV now, I can't watch it anymore.
Well, very good. You know, it's good that Hitchens has wisened a lot of people up, you know. And I'll link in the description where you can get the book. I don't have it personally, but I'm certainly thinking of getting it. I certainly recommend getting it, because this guy's still alive. You know, Bill Clinton, that is.
So I'm really hoping that that's going to become general. And if you...
In case you're wondering, by the way, Hillary is a mid-range narcissist.
If he can't be thrown out of office, at least people will turn their backs on him.
The book is called No One Left to Lie To. Our guest is Christopher Hitchens, Del Mar, California, on our conservative line. Good morning.
Good morning. I continue to be very troubled by the so-called trial that took place in the Senate.
I mean, you talk about, you know, Trump talking about draining the swamp, which is impossible, and he doesn't have the cognitive level to do it because he's an upper lesser type B narcissist, and plus he's no longer in office. But the swamp is way too stagnant, too deep. I don't know what the right expression is, but it's too horrific to really cleanse, if that's the right word for it. You know, the swamp of corruption in Washington is just unbelievable. I think it's way beyond what even Trump was aware of.
I wonder if you can reveal anything to me why a Republican Senate was so accommodating to the other side. I heard Mr. Ship.
Because they're craven. It's one of my favorite words. It's one that I learned from A Song of Ice and Fire. But craven, it means cowardly, complicit.
Who I thought should have really done the trial, say that Joseph Biden, a Democrat who, from Robert Bork fame, vetoed him. Why did Trent Lott allow...
Joe Biden's a narcissist. He's a mid-range narcissist, in case you're wondering.
This trial really not to take place. Even the Republican senators from Maine didn't want witnesses, live witnesses. I mean, it was, 7 hours of videotape testimony of a president who I believe they all know is unfit to be there, and we probably wouldn't have this war if they had convicted him.
Thanks, caller.
On the weekend after there was this row about my testimony to the House Judiciary Committee, I did get a call at home, as I'd been told I might, from a senator, a senior Democrat, a guy I actually quite admire. I can't give his name, alas, but who said that he, after what I'd said and other things that he'd learned, he was now determined that he would vote to convict on certainly on the count of obstruction of justice. I was impressed, and then he began to talk about how, well, maybe the thing's been presented in too partisan a way, and I remember thinking, I wonder if he really is going to vote that day. And of course, that day, to the lasting shame of the Democratic Party, he voted. Not one single Democratic senator voted to convict on the evidence, which was quite clearly preposterous.
Well, if you think America's salvageable, way back when Clinton was in office, it was beyond salvation.
And that was the most noticeable thing, but the lady in question is quite right to say that there was a mysterious lack of enthusiasm on the Republican side. It would take a long time to explain all the reasons I think why that's true, but in effect, there had been a Clinton-Gingrich co-presidency until quite recently. The Republican Party had no real political quarrel with the president. The president, after all, was enacting most of their program, and in the middle, indeed, of the trial itself. He, in a step that I think, among other things, constitutes vote buying in the potential jury, announced that, yes, after all, he is going to not just test but build the Star Wars, the SDI system, the most expensive and destabilizing and dangerous and wasteful boondoggle in military, in political, indeed in political and economic history. So they were aware of that. They had the president where they wanted him. They said, okay, you enact our agenda, we might go easy on you. The second thing was that the Republican Party knows how to watch Wall Street and the opinion polls as well as anybody else does, perhaps a little better. certainly no worse. And it seemed to be the ruling of Wall Street and the Dow Jones and the opinion polls that impeachment was a waste of time or diversion, or at best. And at a meeting in...
Well, America might have been salvageable if they had impeached President Clinton, but alas, they did not. So anyway, I think I've let this kind of run long enough here. I'll like the video if you want to check out more of it. So yeah, if you want to check it out, follow the link below, and thanks for watching.